What's up? Chuck Pippin here, not on the water today. I'm doing a video that I've had a lot of requests about, and that's about line choice. Braid, fluorocarbon, monofilament. What are you supposed to use? What's the best kind of lines to use when you're bass fishing? I've got a huge selection of lines right here, and we're gonna go out to my top secret lure testing facility that's located right back here. So let's go. This is a pretty difficult video to shoot, and I don't think I could do it on my own. So I've enlisted a production company, my own production company, and just because I want this video has been requested a bunch of times, and I want to make sure I do it right. So let me introduce you to my production company. All right, guys, go ahead and introduce yourselves.
I'm Adeline Pippin, the managing partner of CPF Productions, but I really don't want to be on camera.
Hi, I'm Parker Pippin, and I specialize in underwater videography.
Not yet. No, you're good. All right, so let's get into this. Let's talk about the three main types of fishing line. Most of you guys probably already know this, but some of you guys might be beginners, so I'm going to try and explain everything the best I can. You got monofilament. This is trilene big game, by far inexpensive, but my favorite type of monofilament. I love the green. They make it in clear also, but I love trilene big game. You have fluorocarbon. We have Sunline, one of my favorites, and I also like the trilene with the gold label there. My two favorite fluorocarbons. Low stretch and supposedly invisible underwater. We'll get to that later. And then you have Braided Line. Braided Line, no stretch. No stretch at all. Hard to tie knots for some people, hard to cast for some people. But a lot of people, this is their favorite right here, Braided Line. Let's talk about these. If you watch any of my other videos, and I get a lot of questions about this, I primarily use monofilament. And I get that question, why do you always use monofilament? Well, when I'm guiding, we do a lot of different techniques. We might be throwing lipless crankbaits, Texas rig worm, top water. We might be fishing up against grass, doing a bunch of different stuff. Monofilament, to me, is the most versatile because it's more buoyant than braid can be. It's definitely more buoyant than fluorocarbon, which sinks a lot. And it does have a lot of stretch, supposedly. But it has very high, it's very abrasion resistant, where fluorocarbon is not. This is 15-pound test, green, trilene big game. And right here we have 15-pound test, trilene, fluorocarbon. 100% fluorocarbon. I don't like the coated fluorocarbon. So this is 100% fluorocarbon. On bait casters, your monofilament is going to cast a lot better than fluorocarbon is because it's more pliable. The stretch, people say they don't like monofilament because it stretches too much. I've never had a problem with that. I don't mind if the line stretches. Sometimes if you're all amped up in a tournament, having a little bit of stretch on an overpowering hook set might be a benefit there. And if you're not strong enough or physically capable enough to overcome that, then you might want to switch to another line. But I do like monofilament, and I'm not convinced that the fish can see it better underwater than fluorocarbon. That's the big thing with fluorocarbon, is people say it has low stretch, and it's supposedly more or less visible, less visible underwater than monofilament. I don't know. We did a pool test. We're going to show you here in a minute about the pool test. I have braid, monofilament, and fluorocarbon underwater in my pool, my top secret lure testing facility. We tested them out to see which one is the most invisible. I can tell you it's probably not going to be the braid. But I do use fluorocarbon. I don't like to use it in top water situations because it sinks like a rock. I know a lot of people like to use braid in top water situations, and that's okay as long as it's new braid. When I have older braid with some dirt and grime in it, and maybe it's more water's been absorbed into it, it tends to sink faster. So I have used braid when it's new. And that means like the first, second, or third trip. After that, I don't even attempt to do it. If you are going to use braid with top water, you're going to want to use a frog. Use it when you're frog fishing up in heavy cover where you might not be able to get them out of that heavy cover if you're not using the more powerful, lower diameter braid. But let's go back to the fluorocarbon. Clear water situations, anytime. We don't use it much here in Florida. I don't think you need to use it a lot here in Florida, even on the clear waters that we have, like the Butler chain of lakes. If you're using weightless baits, or any type of bait that's weightless, it's gonna, being that it's less pliable, which means bendy, than monofilament, you're gonna have, baits are gonna sink different. If you watch some of my videos like on how to fish a fluke, where I'm dead sticking flukes, it's a different fall rate, a wacky rig Senko, than it is with fluorocarbon. Fluorocarbon will sink quicker, but this is a more natural sinking action because it's more pliable, more bendy. And I also like that green monofilament when I'm on the clear waters of the Butler chain, because the water kind of has a green tint and I just have better confidence in it. So there's your monofilament, great for slow moving topwater baits, like if you're fishing a chug bug type bait or that 13 fishing dual pitch, where a lot of places I've been, it's quick walk, 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 walk. Here in Florida, we like to twitch, twitch, and long, long pauses. And this will float better, as long as it's clean, better than your fluorocarbon and definitely your braid. Fluorocarbon, again, better in sinking situations where your baits are sinking. You don't have to worry about them staying buoyant. Less stretch than monofilament, supposedly. I've never tested that. I know some people have disproven that. I might put a link in a video where they disprove the stretching between the monofilament and the fluorocarbon if I can find it. But I prefer, if I had the choice, if I was in clear water situations, and I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me, but if I had the choice, if I was in crystal clear waters, like some of those northern Alabama lakes, Tennessee even, or up in Lake Erie, places like that, Champlain, places like that, if I had to choose, if I had to get in a situation where I was using 6-pound test line, I honestly think I would choose 6-pound monofilament over 6-pound fluorocarbon. 6-pound test. You get a little scratch or nick in 6-pound fluorocarbon, it turns into 1-pound fluorocarbon at that nick or that abrasion point. Braided line. Don't put braided line on everything that you have. 80% of my customers that show up with their own fishing tackle, with their own bait casters, have it balled up with 50-pound test braid, because every fish that they're going to catch is 10 pounds or bigger, and that's not always the case. I flip typically with 50 to 65-pound braid. I know a lot of guys go up to 80-pound when they're flipping those big, heavy 2-ounce weights. I've done that before, but I feel like I'm fishing with rope or twine. I rarely ever use more than 65-pound braid for flipping, and when I can get away with it, I'll go to 50-pound braid for flipping. Most of my rods that I'm using casting braid, I'm using 30 to 40-pound braid. 40 for frog fishing, 30 for open water fishing if I'm in heavy grass. Spinning rods, I like to use that 20-pound braid. 20-pound braid on like a 3000 series or size spinning rod is the best line you can put on there. So braid, no stretch, great for heavy cover, frog fishing, flipping. Not good for fishing around wood. The reason being, this stuff will cut into wood more than monofilament or fluorocarbon will, because it's thinner, it's more coarse. Fishing brush piles, you fish with braid, you're going to hang up a lot more than if you're fishing with monofilament or fluorocarbon. I'm not going to tell you between the monofilament and fluorocarbon that you need to choose between those. This comes down to personal preference. I have a lot more faith in monofilament. So if you show up to fish with me on a guide trip here in Central Florida, don't be surprised if 90% of the rods on my boat all have that green Trilene Big Game. I'm not sponsored by them, have no deal with Trilene at all. I just like Trilene Big Game. Has nothing to do with the price. I think this spool was like 30 bucks. If it was 80, I like it, I'd pay $80 for it. Don't raise the price though, Trilene. Like Power Pro. Power Pro is my favorite braid. It's just what I like. Not this video is not about brands though. So now let's get into rod choice, rod selection when it comes to pairing them up with right type of line. Start with a spinning rod here. By the way, I'm in my wife's sitting room when she sees this video. This is a sitting room. There's 4 of these matching chairs around here. It's a beautiful room, all decorated. This is her mirror wall. Some little artwork she did over here, and a nice coffee table that my camera's sitting on. We're not supposed to sit in here, and it's a beautiful rug that I have no idea how much she paid for it. She calls it a sitting room, but nobody's allowed to sit in here. Do you have one of those rooms at your house? Anyway, spinning rod. Every spinning rod I have is spooled up with braided line. Why? This is 20 pound braided line on here. 20 pound Power Pro on a 3000 size or 3000 reel Creed GT from 13 Fishing with a 7 foot, 7 foot 1 medium heavy action spinner rod. 15 pound braid, you can get away with that, but this has the diameter of probably 6 to 8 pound test monofilament. If I put 6 to 8 pound test monofilament on here, I wouldn't be able to do a lot of the stuff that we're doing here. But we use these rods, shiner. I was using this earlier today, using live bait, throwing big 8 and 10 inch shiners out there. It's 30 pound test. You don't need to put 50 pound braid on everything you got. 30 pound test, or I'm sorry, 20 pound test braid on a spinning rod is the best casting line you can find. It stays on the spool nice. It doesn't twist like monofilament does. You put monofilament or fluorocarbon on a spinning reel, every rotation of the arm on this reel is going to twist it. Lots of twists, lots of twists, lots of twists. So you put braid on a spinning rod, 15 to 20 pound, 30 if you have to. It'll do everything you need. I've gone down to, like, I remember, I think I was in Smith Lake a few years back throwing a little shaky head up in Alabama. I think it was Smith Lake. And I had 10 pound braid with a 6 pound fluorocarbon leader. I broke off a few fish, wish I would have used monofilament, but 10 for that because it was light, shaky head action, that type of stuff. But my favorite, 20 pound Power Pro braided line on your spinning reels. You can't go wrong with that. Next, my big old 8 foot flipping stick here. I think this is a 1.5 ounce tungsten weight, heavy flipping, 65 pound braid. I don't throw frogs with 65 pound braid because you don't need it. You can't cast them as far. On my frog rod, I have 40 pound test braid because it is 40 pound test, people. 40 pound test. I've caught 8 pounders, 9 pounders. I did a video where I caught a 913 up in the pads. I had 40 pound test braid. It's 40 pound test. 40 pounds. You don't need 65 pound braid for throwing frogs or anything like that. I don't care how big the fish are, how thick the cover is. 40 pound test braid throwing frogs, 65 flipping, 50 if you can get away with it, flipping hyacinths that are moving around. 50 pound braid's perfect. Punching through hydrillomats and mud tuskets, which is the big floating mud you see around lily pads like we have down on Lake Kissimmee and Toho in some places. Maybe 80. I know my buddy Scott Martin likes to flip 80. We've had a lot of heated discussions over the years about that. I don't like flipping 80. 65 pound braid for all your flipping needs. 30 to 40 pound for frog, primarily 40. This rod here does have fluorocarbon on it. Why does it have fluorocarbon on it? Because I did some film work with 13 Fishing. Looks like 17 pound fluorocarbon. I did some film work with 13 Fishing for this new 13 Fishing A2. The Concept A2 from 13 Fishing. And they brought the rod and reel already spooled up with fluorocarbon. It's great. It's working great. I don't think fluorocarbon lasts as long, especially in this heat or even in cold conditions. It tends to coil up and has a lot of memory. But there's your fluorocarbon. Throwing a Texas rigworm on that. And then, like I said, if I have 50 rods, 45 of them are spooled up with 12, 15, and 20 pound trilene, green, big game. Dead stick and a fluke, I can throw this thing about 2.5 miles with a weightless fluke with 15 pound trilene big game, tied on straight to the hook with a Palomar knot. Palomar knot. I did a video a while back on the 3 knots you need for bass fishing, which are the Palomar, the double uni knot and a snell knot every once in a while. And you can go back and watch that. I'll throw a link to that video in the description also. But Trilene Big Game, 15-pound test. It's good all around line. It casts well. It casts well. And if you're not getting your lure where it needs to be, then you don't have to worry about getting fish in. That's the most important thing you can take away from this. Don't worry about your line. If you're using this type of line, but you can't get that lure where it needs to be because your line's too heavy, you don't have enough on here, you don't cast it well, then why does it matter? First, get your lures where they need to be, then figure out with your fighting skills. You're all good fighters. Fight that fish in with a good rod, good reel, set your drag right, 15-pound monofilament. Now, let's get into the visibility or lack thereof of fishing line. Everybody in their heads says fluorocarbon is invisible or near invisible, less visible than monofilament is. I did a study, you're going to see here in just a second, where we have monofilament, fluorocarbon, and braid underwater. I'm pretty sure you'll be able to see the braid, but I threw it in there since that's the three lines that we're talking about. Let's get to that.
Okay, let's get this right the first time. Now take this camera and do your work.
Okay, so here's our visibility test. As you can see, we have braid on the right, fluorocarbon's in the middle, and monofilament is on the right. Again, underwater camera work, videography done by Parker Pippin, directed by Adeline Pippin. Braid you can clearly see. The fluorocarbon, can't really see it. Monofilament, you can't really see it either. Maybe a little bit more. But can the fish see it? You be the judge. Braid, you can definitely see it. Fluoro is in the middle, and monofilament is on the left.